The galaxy had seen fear before, plenty of it. Predators with teeth like plasma lances, war beasts bred to shred armored infantry, shadows that crawled across entire planets and left silence in their wake. Fear wasn't new. What was new, however, was watching a pack of scaled hunters turn tail and sprint for the underbrush the moment a small, squat, shaggy little mammal waddled into view. At first, the aliens thought it was some kind of joke. The creature was barely the size of a cub, with coarse fur, small beady eyes, and a snub nose that twitched as though sniffing out lunch. It didn't strut, didn't stalk, didn't roar. It waddled. And yet the predators, born and bred killers, wanted nothing to do with it. The creature was called a honey badger. The humans, of course, knew better. They always did. Yeah, said Specialist Rafe Calder, grinning as he slung his rifle across his back. That's Bruiser. Don't let the size fool you. He'll eat through a power cable just to see what's inside. You guys might want to step back. The squad of Velcrin hunters hissed, their scales flattening as they stared at the squat mammal rooting through a pile of ration crates. The leader of the hunters, a 7-foot-tall brute with a jaw full of teeth meant for ripping bone, tilted his head in disbelief. That thing? He growled. You brought a snack animal? Into the hunting grounds? Rafe chuckled. Snack animal? Buddy, that's no snack. That's the galaxy's worst nightmare stuffed into 30 pounds of fur. He's basically bulletproof. Go ahead, take a swipe at him. See what happens. The Velcrin snarled, his tail whipping in irritation. This entire mission had already been an insult. First, the Galactic Council had forced his hunting clan to guide the humans through their own sacred predator grounds, a trial by blood, where only the fiercest dared to step. Then the human had insisted on bringing not only his weapons, not only his reckless grin, but also a pet. Now, instead of preparing for battle, they were watching this ridiculous little beast chew through military-grade polymer packaging like it was dried meat. The Velcrin cubs, who had been trailing nervously behind their elders, peeked out from the bushes. One let out a sharp hiss of fear when the honey badger looked up, face smeared with nutrient paste, and waddled straight toward them. The cubs scrambled backward, tail puffed out in terror. The hunters hissed in confusion. Why would a cub fear such a small animal? Unless... Bruiser stopped just short of the cub, tilted his head, and opened his mouth in a lazy yawn. The cub squealed, bolted behind its mother's legs, and refused to come out. See? Rafe said smugly. Even your kids know. That's instinct talking. Survival mode. Deep down, they can feel it. You're looking at pure chaos wrapped in fur. The Velcrin leader let out a contemptuous growl. No creature that small can kill a Velcrin. Rafe shrugged. Not sure about killing. But I've seen him take down snakes, porcupines, and once, I swear to God, a lion. Just ripped its face off. He doesn't do quit. He doesn't do fear. He just keeps coming. As if to prove the point, Bruiser suddenly plunged headfirst into a thorn bush and began rooting around like the spikes didn't exist. A moment later, he emerged with a fat alien centipede wriggling in his jaws, chewed noisily, and swallowed it whole. Then he looked at the Velcrin like they might be next. The hunters shuffled backward. Rafe grinned. It wasn't supposed to be like this. The Council had set this trial to humble humanity. To remind the upstart species that even if they'd survived their death world, they were still prey among predators. The Velcrin hunting grounds were infamous. Beasts the size of tanks roamed freely, ambushing anything foolish enough to step inside. Dozens of species had failed to pass through alive. The humans, the Council had assumed, would be no different. But no one had factored in Rafe, or Bruiser. The two had been partners since Earth. Rafe had found the honey badger as a half-starved orphan tearing apart a collapsed storage unit back in Nairobi. Most people would have shot it on sight, but Rafe had tossed it a ration bar instead. Bruiser had stolen 3 more, bit him on the ankle, and followed him home. Somehow, that counted as friendship. From then on, the creature refused to leave Rafe's side. Now, in the heart of the galaxy's most feared hunting grounds, the Velcrin were realizing that maybe the humans had brought more than just guns and bravado. The first real test came at dusk. The pack was moving through a valley choked with vines when the ground itself shifted. Scaled ridges rose from the mud, forming the outline of a massive reptilian beast. The Velcrin scattered, hissing battle cries, weapons primed. The beast's jaws split open, each tooth the size of a human's forearm, and it lunged, straight for Rafe. The hunters smirked. This was it. The arrogant human would be eaten, and his absurd pet with him. Lesson delivered. Trial completed. But instead of fear, Rafe simply stepped sideways, raising his rifle with a lazy calm. And Bruiser charged. The honey badger darted straight toward the beast's gaping maw, utterly fearless. With a guttural snarl, he launched himself upward, clamping his jaws around the monster's lip. The beast roared, thrashing violently, but Bruiser held fast, biting and clawing with manic fury. "Jesus, Bruiser!" Rafe shouted, half laughing, half alarmed. "You're supposed to scare it, not climb inside its mouth." The Velcrin stared in disbelief as the tiny mammal dangled from the reptile's face like some kind of living bear trap. Every thrash only seemed to make Bruiser angrier. The beast finally slammed its head into the ground, trying to dislodge him. Dust and rocks exploded outward. When the smoke cleared, Bruiser was still there, snarling, bloodied but unbroken. And the beast retreated. The predators of the predator grounds had no word for what they had just seen. Beasts that size did not retreat. They devoured, crushed, shredded, but never retreated. Yet here was their apex, backing away from a 30-pound scrap of fur and rage. Rafe gave a slow whistle. "Told you." The Velcrin leader snarled, shaken but unwilling to admit it. "That was luck. Nothing more." "Sure," Rafe said casually, crouching down to pat Bruiser, who waddled back over, blood dripping from his muzzle, completely unbothered. "Luck. Let's call it that." Night fell heavy over the valley. Alien stars burned sharp against the black sky. Strange howls echoed from the cliffs, beasts gathering in the dark. The Velcrin set up camp nervously, spears in hand, eyes scanning every shadow. Rafe, meanwhile, stretched out against a rock, Bruiser curled up at his side, snoring like a chainsaw. The leader of the Velcrin pack paced restlessly. "This is wrong. The beasts are unsettled. They feel it too." One of the younger hunters hissed softly. "What if the human is right? What if the small beast does not prey at all?" The leader rounded on him with a growl. "Silence. No creature so small can shake the predator grounds." But in the dark, every time a beast howled, every time shadows moved, the Velcrin hunter's eyes flicked toward the sleeping honey badger. Because deep inside, where instinct lived, they weren't so sure anymore. And somewhere out in the night, predators that had never known fear paused, sniffed the air, and stayed far away. Because something worse had come. The predators didn't retreat after that first bloody encounter. If anything, their curiosity sharpened into obsession. To them, this wasn't just prey anymore, it was an anomaly. A honey badger that didn't run from death but laughed at it. A creature that fought with reckless defiance. And worse, it had a human companion. The idea burned like an infection in the predator's collective mind. What were these two? Why did they move as though they trusted each other more than their own instincts? The galaxy knew predators. Every species had its hunters. But this pairing, made no sense. One tiny mammal that should have been on the bottom of the food chain, and one soft-skinned primate, slow and fragile by galactic standards. Yet together they had cut down a hunting pack that should have annihilated them in minutes. The jungle spread before them, dense with shadows and thick air that smelled of rot, blood, and unseen things. Cale adjusted the strap on his rifle. The human had long stopped looking worried about the dangers of the wild. Instead, he looked alert. Focused. Not the fear-driven alertness of prey, but the measured calm of someone scanning the battlefield. Beside him, the honey badger, whom Cale had started calling Gristle because of its stubborn, chewed-up appearance, ambled forward, claws scraping against the roots and soil. Its movements seemed casual, but Cale had already learned the creature never relaxed. It was a bundle of fury coiled tight, waiting for the smallest excuse to explode. "They're circling us," Cale muttered under his breath. Gristle paused, nose twitching. The badger gave a low growl and pawed at the dirt. "Yeah, you smell it too." Cale crouched, eyes darting. He couldn't see them yet, but he knew. They were being tracked. The predators were testing them. Not rushing in this time. They had learned their first mistake. Now they hunted with patience, waiting for weakness. Cale felt his pulse steady. He had trained for this: patience, endurance, knowing when not to waste energy. But this wasn't just survival anymore. He had to understand why they were obsessed with him and Gristle. Then the first sign came. A shrill cry overhead as a flock of carrion birds burst into the sky, startled by something moving fast through the underbrush. Cale raised his rifle. Gristle bared its teeth. They didn't charge. Instead, a shape slithered out, a predator unlike the last ones. Its body was low to the ground, armored in scales, its mouth lined with teeth that bent inward like hooks. A constrictor hunter, Cale guessed. Designed to immobilize and suffocate prey before tearing it apart. It hissed, circling. Cale swung the rifle but didn't shoot yet. He was conserving ammunition, watching its pattern. The predator lunged. Gristle exploded into motion, faster than Cale could blink. The badger barreled straight into the predator's head, latching on with claws and teeth. The scaled creature screamed, thrashing violently, slamming its body against trees and rocks to dislodge the furry menace. Cale darted to the side, rifle raised, tracking movement in case more were coming. The jungle trembled with the violent struggle. Leaves fell like rain. Blood sprayed across roots and bark. And still Gristle didn't let go. Finally, the predator tried a desperate roll, slamming its own skull into the ground. That did it. Gristle loosened for just an instant. But Cale was ready. He squeezed the trigger, sending a precise burst of rounds straight into the creature's exposed throat. The beast went still. Silence fell again, broken only by Gristle's snarls as it clawed a few last times at the corpse, refusing to acknowledge death until it was certain. Then, finally, the honey badger trotted back to Cale, dripping with gore and looking deeply satisfied. Cale shook his head. "You're insane," he muttered with a grin. "But I guess so am I." He wasn't wrong. A sane man wouldn't still be alive out here, fighting alongside a creature that seemed more demon than animal. But Cale wasn't just surviving, he was starting to understand. The predators weren't targeting him by chance. They weren't trying to feed. They were studying him. And that terrified him more than the claws and teeth. Hours passed as they moved deeper into the jungle, every step shadowed by eyes Cale couldn't see. Twice more they were ambushed, and twice more Gristle threw itself at attackers without hesitation. Cale shot when he had to, struck with his blade when they got too close, and every time, the predators pulled back sooner than expected. Not beaten, but retreating deliberately. Testing. Measuring. By nightfall, Cale had set up a small camp against the cliffside, a place with fewer angles of approach. He built no fire, the predators would only see it as an invitation. Instead, he sat in the darkness, rifle across his knees, listening. Gristle dug a shallow hole beside him, curled up, and closed its eyes. But Cale wasn't fooled. The badger would be awake at the first snap of a twig. His thoughts spun. Why him? Why the badger? What lesson did these predators hope to learn? That was when the voice came. Not a sound in the air, but a vibration in his skull, alien and sharp. Words, not entirely formed but understandable. You endure. You bleed. You refuse. Why? Cale stiffened, jaw tightening. Telepathic communication? He had heard rumors of species that could project thoughts, but this was the first time he'd felt it himself. He forced his mind into stillness. If they could hear him, he had to choose his response carefully. Because that's what we do, he whispered, half to himself. We endure. We fight. We don't stop until we win. The presence in his head pulsed again, curious. Small beast. Small human. Why do you resist death? Cale's lips twitched into a humorless smile. You really don't get it, do you? We don't resist death. We stare it in the face, laugh, and make it regret showing up. At his side, Gristle gave a growl, as if agreeing. The presence withdrew, but Cale knew it wasn't gone. They were watching closer now. That night was the longest of his life. Shapes moved in the distance, eyes glowed faintly in the dark, but no direct attack came. They were waiting for something. Testing limits? By dawn, Cale was exhausted but alive. He stood, stretching sore muscles, while Gristle shook itself and dug into a fallen log for beetles to snack on, utterly unfazed by the night's tension. Cale checked his rifle and tightened his boots. All right, partner, he said softly. Looks like they're not letting us leave without making a statement. So maybe it's time we show them what a statement really looks like. The honey badger snapped its jaws and licked blood from its claws. Together, they walked deeper into the jungle, straight toward the heart of enemy territory. Because if predators wanted to understand fear, Cale decided, then he and Gristle were going to teach them. The predators had thought themselves clever, circling in the shadows and wearing the smirk of inevitability. But that illusion cracked when one of their fastest hunters screamed, collapsing in a spray of dirt and blood, felled by a blur that was not a gun, not a blade, but something small, feral, and terrifying. The honey badger. It didn't run from them. It ran toward them. Snapping jaws, tearing claws, unbothered by size, rank, or weapons. And standing behind it, calm as if watching an afternoon sparring match, was the human. Still want to play? He asked, voice echoing against the ravine walls. The predators hesitated for the first time that night. Hesitation was rare for their kind. Predators fed on instinct, on movement, on certainty. They weren't used to being stared down by prey that smiled back. The human's grin was unsettling enough. But the little beast at his feet, that was something else entirely. One of them, a larger male with jagged spines across his shoulders, snarled and stepped forward. It is small. A distraction? The honey badger lifted its head, lips peeling back in what looked disturbingly like a grin. Then it charged again. The spined warrior barely had time to raise his spear before the badger hit him with a crack of impact that sent both tumbling. The predator roared, shaking violently as the creature latched onto his arm. Teeth punctured thick hide, claws tore through tendon. He smashed it against a rock. Again. And again. But the badger didn't let go. The predators watching took a step back. Their leader, cloaked in bone plates and glowing tattoos, hissed low in his throat. This is unnatural. The human crouched down, brushing dust from his knees. Unnatural? His voice carried across the clearing, smooth and taunting. That's just breakfast back home. You wanted to taste human fear? You found the wrong man. The honey badger finally released its victim, not because it had been shaken off, but because it was satisfied. Bloodied, limping, the spined predator stumbled away, clutching what was left of his arm. His companions shifted uneasily. Then the human snapped his fingers. The honey badger darted back to him and stopped at his boots like a trained warhound. Round 2? The human asked. The leader growled, signaling his hunters. Attack! The clearing exploded with motion. They came from every side now, spear wielders, bone knives flashing, nets thrown wide. The honey badger tore into the first two like a chainsaw with fur, leaving one gurgling on the ground and the other screaming with his leg mangled. But the predators adapted quickly. 3 rushed the human directly. He ducked the first spear, wrenched it free, and used it to sweep another's legs. A third slammed into him from behind, claws scraping across his chest. Pain shot through his ribs, but he twisted, driving an elbow into the creature's throat. It coughed and staggered back, wheezing. He didn't have time to think. He moved on instinct, like the honey badger itself, fighting small, brutal, efficient. The predators were learning something uncomfortable. Humans weren't supposed to be this fast. Or this precise. The honey badger leapt onto the back of a towering hunter and went for the throat. Blood sprayed in arcs across the dirt. The creature collapsed, thrashing. The leader snarled, fury mixing with unease. Hold formation! he bellowed. But the command fell apart in the chaos. The badger's fury was too distracting, too overwhelming. The human's precision too punishing. The hunters were used to prey that panicked, not prey that pushed back. One predator finally broke, stumbling back toward the shadows. Another followed. "Cowards!" the leader spat. The human heard it and laughed. A sharp, dangerous laugh. "Funny! That's what we call your kind where I'm from. Bully something weaker, and you're a predator. Meet something tougher, and suddenly you're a coward." The leader's eyes narrowed. He raised his staff high, glowing tattoos pulsing brighter. Energy hummed through the air. "You think you are clever. You think this beast makes you untouchable. But I have not yet begun." The earth trembled. The tattoos along his arms flared, and the very shadows behind him thickened into moving forms. From the dark crawled something else, larger, armored, with mandibles that clicked like knives. War beasts bred for one purpose, overwhelming force. The human's smirk faltered. "Just slightly." "Ah. So you do have reinforcements." The honey badger growled at the creatures, unbothered. Its fur bristled like steel wire. The beast charged. The human ducked the first swipe, rolling across the ground, grabbing a predator's fallen blade. He slashed upward, severing a tendon in one of the monster's legs. It screamed but didn't fall. Another beast lunged from the side, only for the honey badger to meet it head-on, sinking its teeth into the joint of its armor plating. The beast roared, trying to shake it off. The human dove forward, driving his stolen blade straight into its exposed eye. The monster thrashed, collapsing. But two more came. And now, for the first time, the human's heart pounded not with thrill, but with weight. He wasn't sure they could hold forever. Not against this many. Not without. The honey badger screeched, feral and furious, tearing through another warbeast's leg. Blood and ichor splattered across the dirt. The human's grin returned, sharp and wild. "Yeah. Not without you." The clearing had become a storm of violence. Every predator screamed, lunged, or bled. Every movement was answered with human grit and badger fury. Then it happened. The leader himself entered the fray. He struck with a staff that pulsed with lightning, crackling arcs that scorched the air. The first strike hit the ground beside the human, throwing him back in a spray of dirt. The human rolled to his feet, coughing, ribs screaming. The leader advanced. "You will break. Your beast will die. And your story will end here." The human wiped blood from his mouth and steadied his grip on the blade. His voice was hoarse but steady. "Stories don't end with humans, friend. They begin with us." The honey badger launched itself at the leader, but the staff cracked against its side, hurling it into the dirt. It rolled, dazed, but dragged itself back up, snarling. The leader laughed. "Even your monster cannot withstand this." The human's eyes blazed. "It's not a monster. It's a badger. And it doesn't know the meaning of giving up." He lunged. The leader swung the staff again, lightning flashing. The human ducked low, the heat searing his skin. He drove forward, inside the arc, slamming his blade into the leader's abdomen. The leader roared, but his strength didn't falter. He brought the staff down across the human's back, sending fire through his nerves. The honey badger tore into the leader's leg, ripping muscle, clawing bone. The predator howled, staggering. The human forced himself upright, vision blurring, every muscle screaming. He shoved the blade deeper, twisting. "This is what it feels like when prey fights back." The leader collapsed, gurgling, his tattoos dimming. The staff fell, sparking one last time before flickering out. The war beasts, sensing the loss of command, faltered. The predators scattered. Some fled into the night. Others fell, torn apart by claws or cut down by desperate human steel. The clearing went quiet. The human collapsed to his knees, breathing ragged. The honey badger limped over, bloodied but alive, and pressed itself against his leg. He laughed weakly, ruffling its fur. "Yeah, we're still here. Guess they didn't know fear until tonight, huh?" The stars above flickered like watchful eyes. Somewhere in the galaxy, word of this fight would spread. Predators would whisper about the night they thought they were the hunters, only to meet a human and his honey badger. And for the first time, the predators realized they might not be the top of the food chain after all. The predators had seen victories turn to ash before, but never like this. Not when their fleets outnumbered an opponent 10-1. Not when the prey was already supposed to be fleeing, broken, whimpering in the shadows. Yet on the battlefield, what still echoed in their collective memory wasn't the clash of warships or the roar of plasma fire. It was the laugh of a human and the guttural growl of the small, impossible beast beside him. Jack stood in the ruined outpost, clothes torn, one arm bandaged roughly with strips of scorched fabric. Dust floated down in shafts of light from collapsed ceilings. His chest still heaved from the last bout, but his eyes carried no fear, only the same maddening calm that had unsettled his enemies since the first moment he walked into the predator-held lands. At his feet, the honey badger prowled back and forth like a storm contained in muscle and fur, its coat ragged but its gaze bright, daring any living thing left to step closer. "You still with me, Badger?" Jack's muttered voice raspy. The animal snorted, then tore into the remains of a predator drone with almost casual malice, ripping out wires as if they were sinew. Jax let out a hoarse chuckle. "Yeah. Thought so." But the fight wasn't over. Across the field of wreckage, the predators gathered what remained of their numbers. No longer was this about conquest. No longer about territory or even pride. For them, this had become survival against a creature that should never have mattered, and against a human whose tactics defied every page of their war doctrine. Their commander, a towering figure with eyes like molten metal, snarled as he watched his forces hesitate. "You fear a scavenger beast and a single mammal? Then you are prey already." His voice carried across the ranks, but the quiver of doubt was in them all. They had seen plasma rifles drained by Jax's ambushes, battle claws tangled in traps laid by hands that understood forests and ruins alike. Worst of all, they had seen comrades reduced to wreckage by a creature that should not care if it lived or died. The predators charged one last time. A swarm. Every soldier they had left. Jax felt his throat tighten, not with fear but with the weight of knowing this was the final push. No clever feints left. No time for scavenged explosives. It was down to grit, to instinct, to the strange and feral bond between him and the little demon pacing at his side. "All right, Badger," he whispered, crouching low. "One last round. Let's give them something to remember." The swarm hit like a storm, claws scraping, plasma hissing, the ground shaking under armored feet. Jax fired until his rifle sputtered and died, then swung it like a club, bashing skulls and deflecting blades. Blood sprayed. Sparks flew. He felt a searing cut rip across his shoulder but forced his arm to keep swinging. And through it all, there was the honey badger. It lunged into the horde like a force of nature, teeth locking on an enemy's throat, claws ripping open armor joints, snarls and growls mixing with screams of disbelief. It was too small to matter, too insignificant to change the tide. And yet, the predator's formation collapsed around it. Soldiers recoiled, broke ranks, stumbled as the beast tore into them without pause. "Kill it! Kill the thing!" shouted one of the enemy captains. He struck down with a blade glowing red from plasma charge. The honey badger took the strike to its side, fur burning, skin splitting. It screamed, not in pain, but in fury, and latched onto the captain's wrist. With a sickening snap, the weapon clattered to the ground along with the predator's severed hand. Jax saw the shift in the enemy then. Fear turned to panic. What had once been an unstoppable wave was breaking, not against numbers or technology, but against stubbornness incarnate. Still, Jax knew they couldn't hold forever. His arms were heavy, vision swimming. The honey badger was bleeding, every breath a ragged snarl. Yet even so, the beast turned its head toward him, eyes wild but clear. "No!" Jax muttered, shaking his head as if he understood the unspoken message. "Don't you dare quit on me! Not now!" And then he did the most human thing the predators could never predict. He laughed. The sound rose above the chaos, raw and defiant. Jax staggered forward, laughing at the swarm even as blood dripped from his wounds. He shouted with a grin through gritted teeth. "You think this is fear? You haven't seen anything yet!" The predators faltered. Not because of weapons, not because of tactics, but because in that instant, they realized the truth. If a wounded human and a half-dead scavenger could still laugh in their faces, then nothing they could do would ever make these creatures break. Moments later, reinforcements arrived. Not human fleets, just a handful of scouts who had followed Jax's signal flare through the storm. But to the predators, it was as if the entire human race had materialized out of the dust. Their courage shattered. One by one, they dropped weapons, retreated into the wilds, or simply fled into the ruins to escape the memory of what they had seen. When the battlefield fell silent, Jax dropped to his knees. He pulled the honey badger into his arms despite its claws tearing at his chest. The beast snarled once more, then went limp, still breathing but utterly spent. "You crazy, stubborn little monster," Jax whispered, pressing his forehead against its bloody fur. "Guess that makes two of us." The scouts approached cautiously, their faces pale with shock as they took in the devastation. One of them, a young woman with wide eyes, finally found her voice. "Sir, did you just hold off an army?" Jack smirked, too tired to stand. "Nah. Wasn't me," asked the badger. Laughter rippled through the scouts, shaky and disbelieving, but real. And in that laughter came a shift. Word would spread fast, faster than fleets could travel. The predators had met humanity. Not in fleets, not in towering weapons, but in a single stubborn soldier and the impossible beast that fought beside him. In the days that followed, rumors raced through the stars. Tales of the honey badger that would not die, of the human who laughed in the face of fear, of predators who fled from prey. The story grew, twisted, exaggerated, but one truth remained at its core: humanity was not to be measured in numbers or strength of arms. Humanity was dangerous because it refused to quit. And as long as humans had friends, no matter how small, no matter how unlikely, there was no predator in the galaxy that could claim to understand fear until it faced them. Jax, lying in recovery, looked at the honey badger curled up at his bedside. Its side rose and fell, patched with stitches, its face still scarred but its eyes glimmering with the same stubborn defiance. "Guess they'll be telling stories about you, huh?" Jax muttered. The badger snorted and turned away. Jax chuckled. "Yeah. Figures. Fame's wasted on you." But deep down, he knew. The galaxy had changed, not because of warships or councils, but because a human and his honey badger had proven something greater than fear. And for predators everywhere, that truth was far more terrifying than any weapon ever built.